The holographic display pulsed with an eerie blue light, casting shadows across Dr. Corin Vesh's scaled features. Her elongated fingers, each tipped with a sensitive pad designed for the most delicate genetic manipulations, hovered over the control panel. The xenogeneticist's compound eyes narrowed as she studied the fragment of human genome floating before her, its double helix rotating slowly in the air of the research station Arceus 9. "Anomalous sequence detected," announced the lab's AI assistant, its voice carefully modulated to avoid startling researchers during delicate procedures. "Pattern suggests non-standard coding." Corin's attention sharpened. After 30 stellar cycles as the Etharan Collective's leading geneticist, she had developed an intuition for significant discoveries. This was one of them. "Isolate and enhance," she commanded, her voice carrying the melodic undertones common to all Etharans. The hologram zoomed in on a specific section of the DNA strand. Unlike the rest of the genome, this segment pulsed with a faint rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. "Curious," Corin murmured. "Run translation protocol Alpha 7. The computer hummed, converting the genetic code into its functional instructions. Results began scrolling across a secondary display. Enhanced neural transmission, accelerated muscle fiber response, heightened adrenal production, pain receptor suppression, and, most disturbing, instructions for cellular transformation under specific stress conditions. "Display cellular response simulation," Corin ordered, her professional detachment beginning to crack. A new hologram formed, a single human cell, unremarkable at first glance. Then the simulation applied stimuli, extreme threat conditions. The cell's response was immediate and terrifying. Microscopic structures emerged from the cell membrane, resembling nanoscopic weapons. Chemical compounds formed within the cytoplasm. Compounds Corin immediately recognized as remarkably similar to combat stimulants developed by the ancient Etharan military during the Blood era. "Halt simulation," she whispered, though the AI had already complied. Corin stepped back from the display, her mind racing to process the implications. The human DNA contained an embedded combat protocol, a literal biological weapon written into their genetic code by evolution itself. A failsafe triggered only under the most extreme conditions, transforming ordinary human cells into microscopic combat machines. "Restrict access to this data," she commanded. "Security level Omega." As the lab's lights dimmed to their night cycle setting, Corin remained, staring at the now locked genetic sequence. The Etharan Collective had outlawed biological weapons centuries ago. After nearly destroying themselves in the galactic wars, now she had discovered that humans, those supposedly primitive beings from the backwater Sol system, carried one inside every cell of their bodies. The question was, did they know? The Etharan Collective represented the pinnacle of interstellar civilization, at least according to its own historical archives. Spanning 17 star systems, the alliance of scholars and scientists had risen from the ashes of the Blood era, when biological weapons had nearly eradicated all Etharan life. Their society now functioned as a technocratic meritocracy, where knowledge and scientific achievement determined one's standing. The Collective's biofusion laboratories were unmatched across known space. Their neural sync interfaces allowed unprecedented mental connection to their technology. Most impressive were their organic starships, living vessels grown rather than built, capable of self-repair and adaptation to space anomalies. Arceus 9, where Corin conducted her research, was one such vessel, a massive biological station in geosynchronous orbit around the uninhabited planet Arceus. Its curved, almost arterial corridors pulsed with bioluminescent light, and its outer hull continuously adapted to protect against space debris and radiation. Beyond the Collective's borders lay the militaristic Zirin Imperium, an expanding force of uniformly avian bipeds with a rigid honor code and an obsession with strength. A tenuous peace had existed between these powers for nearly a century, maintained largely through mutual technological respect and fear. Scattered between these giants were the human colonies. Humanity had achieved faster than light travel only 3 centuries prior, and their expansion had been slowed by internal conflicts and resource limitations. The major powers regarded humans as curiosities at best, backwater primitives with interesting potential but little current relevance to galactic politics. How wrong they had been. Corin reflected as she entered the Central Council chamber the following morning. The chamber's organic architecture mimicked the sacred groves of the Etharan homeworld, spiraling columns resembling ancient trees supporting a canopy-like ceiling that filtered the light of Arceus's sun. 7 council members sat in a semicircle, their blue-green scales glistening in the diffused light. First Speaker Thelen, the eldest among them, gestured for Corin to approach. Geneticist Vesh, he acknowledged, using her formal title. Your emergency request for a full council hearing is most unusual. What discovery demands such urgency? Corin touched her hand to her chest in the formal gesture of truth-swearing. Honored speakers, I have discovered a sequence within the human genome that violates the most sacred prohibition of our collective. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Second Speaker Linthai leaned forward, her facial scales shifting to a pattern indicating skepticism. Explain yourself clearly. Geneticist, she demanded. The human genome contains what can only be described as an embedded combat protocol, Corin stated. Under specific stress conditions, it activates a transformation of human cellular structure, enhancing their physical capabilities for violence and survival. It is, in essence, a biological weapon integrated into their very being. The council chamber erupted in voices. First Speaker. Thelen raised his hand for silence. Show us, he commanded. Corin activated her portable display unit. The simulation she had witnessed in her laboratory now played for the council, the human cell transforming, developing its microscopic weaponry, producing combat-enhancing chemicals. This cannot be natural evolution, declared Third Speaker Movar, the collective's military liaison. This must be artificial modification. I believed the same initially. Corin replied. But my analysis indicates this sequence is ancient, possibly predating humanity's recorded history. It appears to be an evolutionary adaptation, triggered perhaps by predator threats during their species' development. Whether natural or artificial, the implications are severe. First Speaker Thelen said, If the Ziran Imperium learns of this, they already suspect something, interrupted a new voice from the chamber entrance. All heads turned to see Commander Arik Sor, the Ziran military attaché assigned to Arceus IX. His avian features were impossible to read for most Etharans, but Corin had worked with Zirans enough to recognize the predatory focus in his amber eyes. My presence was requested by Speaker Movar, Sor explained, his taloned hand gesturing toward the military liaison. It seems his concern was justified. Corin shot a betrayed look at Speaker Movar, who avoided her gaze. The Imperium has monitored unusual communications from this station for several cycles. Sor continued, striding into the chamber with the distinctive stiff-legged gait of his species. Now I understand why. You've discovered something of military significance. Commander Sor. First Speaker Thelen acknowledged with barely concealed displeasure. This is an internal matter of the collective. Any biological weapon in this sector is an Imperium concern under the Galactic Concordat. Sor countered smoothly. I will need full access to these findings and samples for independent verification. Absolutely not, Corin interjected. This discovery requires ethical review before any action is taken. We don't even know if humans are aware of this genetic feature. Sor's head tilted, a gesture equivalent to a skeptical smile. Dr. Vesh, your commitment to ethics is admirable but misplaced. If humans possess a biological advantage unknown to other species, the balance of power must be reassessed. Before the argument could escalate further, The chamber's communication system chimed. "First speaker," announced the station's coordinator. "The human diplomatic vessel has arrived and requests immediate docking privileges." A heavy silence fell over the chamber. "How convenient," Saw remarked dryly. First speaker. Thelen's scales shifted to a pattern indicating deep concern. "Grant them docking privileges," he ordered, "and summon their representative to this chamber immediately." Lieutenant Mira Takeda adjusted her diplomatic uniform as the airlock cycled, equalizing pressure between the human shuttle and Arceus 9. As Earth's newest xenoanthropology specialist and diplomatic envoy, this was her first solo mission to the Etharan Collective, and she was determined to make a favorable impression. The airlock hissed open, revealing an Etharan official waiting in the docking bay. The alien's blue-green scales shimmered slightly in the station's bioluminescent lighting. "Lieutenant Takeda," the Etharan greeted her, touching 3 elongated fingers to its chest. "I am Coordinator Celis. Your arrival is timely." Mira noted the odd emphasis, but maintained her diplomatic poise. "Thank you for accommodating our unscheduled visit. Coordinator, I bring greetings from Earth Central and a proposal for expanded cultural exchange." "The Council awaits you," Celis replied, gesturing toward a pulsing corridor. "Your timing is such that they have requested your immediate presence." This was unexpected. Mira had anticipated the usual bureaucratic delays before meeting with any high-ranking officials. "Of course," she said smoothly. "Lead the way." As they walked through the organic corridors of the station, Mira observed the Etharan's body language. Her training in xenobiology had taught her to recognize stress patterns in various species, and Coordinator Celis was definitely exhibiting signs of anxiety. "Has something occurred that I should be aware of?" she asked carefully. The Etharan's inner eyelids flickered, a sign of internal conflict. "It is not my place to brief you, Lieutenant. The Council will explain." They arrived at an imposing set of doors that opened silently, revealing a chamber designed to mimic an Etharan forest. 7 Etharans sat in a semicircle, their formal robes indicating council status. But what caught Mira's attention was the Ziran standing off to one side, a military officer, judging by his insignia, and an Etharan female standing before the council, her lab attire marking her as a scientist. All eyes turned to Mira as she entered. The atmosphere was tense enough that she could almost taste it. "Lieutenant Mira Takeda," announced Coordinator Celis, "human diplomatic envoy from Earth Central." The eldest-looking Etharan inclined his head slightly. "I am First Speaker Thelen. Your arrival is fortuitous. Lieutenant, we were just discussing a matter directly concerning your species." Mira's diplomatic training kicked in. "I'm honored to be included in such discussions and happy to provide any insights I can offer." "Indeed," said the Ziran, his beaked face impossible for Mira to read. "Perhaps you can explain why your species carries a biological weapon in its genetic code." Mira blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. "I'm afraid I don't understand." The female Etharan scientist stepped forward. "I am Dr. Corin Vesh, xenogeneticist. Yesterday, I isolated a sequence in the human genome that appears to be a combat enhancement protocol, a biological adaptation that transforms ordinary cells into weapons under stress conditions." She activated a holographic display, showing what appeared to be a simulation of cellular transformation. Mira watched in bewilderment as the human cell in the simulation developed microscopic structures and began producing unfamiliar compounds. "This is impossible," Mira stated flatly. "Human genetics has been thoroughly mapped for centuries. There is no combat protocol in our DNA." "The evidence suggests otherwise," said the Ziran. "I am Commander Arik Sor, military attaché to the Collective, and I must insist on knowing whether your government is aware of this genetic advantage." Mira felt the situation spiraling beyond her diplomatic training. "Commander, I assure you that if such a feature existed, it would be documented in our scientific literature. This must be a misinterpretation of standard human stress responses. I have verified my findings through multiple methodologies, Dr. Vesh insisted. The sequence is dormant under normal conditions, but becomes active when specific threat parameters are met. Has this sequence ever been observed activating in living humans? Mira challenged. A brief silence fell over the chamber. No, Dr. Vesh admitted. My discovery is based on genetic analysis and simulation. Mira seized the opening. Then I suggest we approach this scientifically rather than jumping to conclusions about biological weapons. I would be happy to submit to genetic testing and stress response monitoring to demonstrate that no such combat protocol exists. First speaker. Thelen's scales shifted to a pattern Mira couldn't interpret. A reasonable proposal. Lieutenant, Dr. Vesh will conduct the necessary tests under supervision from both Council observers and Commander Saur. The Ziran made a sharp gesture that Mira recognized as dissatisfaction. The Imperium requests samples be shared with our own genetic specialists. After initial testing confirms or refutes Dr. Vesh's findings, Thelen replied firmly. Until then, this remains a scientific inquiry, not a military one. Commander Saur's amber eyes fixed on Mira with predatory intensity. Very well, but the Imperium will be watching this scientific inquiry with great interest. Lieutenant Takeda. As the council adjourned, Mira approached Dr. Vesh. I'd like to see your complete findings, she said quietly, before we begin any testing. The xenogeneticist studied her with compound eyes. Of course, but I must warn you, Lieutenant, I've spent my career studying genetic structures across dozens of species. What I found in your genome is unlike anything I've seen before. If I'm correct, your species carries a genetic legacy that could change the balance of power in this sector. And if you're wrong, Mira challenged, then I will gladly acknowledge my error. Dr. Vesh replied, but scientific instinct tells me otherwise. As they left the chamber, neither noticed the junior lab assistant lingering nearby, listening intently to their exchange. In the sterile confines of Laboratory 7, Dr. Koren Vesh prepared the equipment for human genetic testing while Lieutenant Takeda reviewed the data from the original discovery. This sequence appears similar to standard human adrenal response genes, Takeda observed, studying the holographic display. It's related to our fight-or-flight mechanism. The surface similarities are what made it difficult to isolate. Koren agreed, but observe the tertiary structure and activation pathways. Standard stress responses don't include cellular reconfiguration or the production of these compounds. Takeda frowned, scrolling through the molecular analysis. These compounds, they resemble synthetic combat stimulants. Precisely, Koren said. Yet they're produced naturally by this genetic sequence when activated. But they're theoretical, Takeda insisted. Your simulation shows what might happen, not what does happen. Koren gestured to the testing chamber, which is why we're conducting a practical trial. The chamber can simulate threat conditions while monitoring cellular activity. Commander Saur entered the laboratory, accompanied by 2 Etharan Council observers. Are we ready to begin? He demanded. Almost, Koren replied, irritation evident in her tone. Lieutenant Takeda has agreed to provide tissue samples and undergo stress response monitoring. Under protest, Takeda added, I maintain that this combat protocol is a misinterpretation of standard human biology. Saur's beaked face remained expressionless, but his posture conveyed skepticism. We shall see. The testing process began with basic tissue sampling, skin, blood, and muscle cells placed in separate containment fields for observation. Koren then guided Takeda into the monitoring chamber, a transparent enclosure fitted with sensors designed to record the subtlest biological changes. The chamber will simulate increasing threat levels, Koren explained, First psychological, then sensory. No actual harm will come to you. I understand, Takeda said, settling into the chair at the chamber's center. The test began. On surrounding screens, the tissue samples were displayed at the cellular level, monitored for any changes. Initially, the chamber merely projected threatening images, predators from various worlds, including Earth. Takeda's vital signs showed mild stress responses, but the tissue samples remained unchanged. The simulation intensified. The chamber now produced sounds and sensations designed to trigger deeper fear responses, the growl of predators, the sensation of falling, flashes of extreme heat and cold. Takeda's heart rate increased. Adrenaline flooded her system, but still, the tissue samples showed only normal human stress responses. This is pointless, Commander Saw declared. The protocol clearly requires more extreme triggers. We must proceed carefully, Corin insisted. Human physiology is more resilient than you give it credit for. Saw interrupted. He approached the chamber controls. Allow me to adjust the parameters. Before Corin could object, Saw input new commands. Inside the chamber, Lieutenant Takeda suddenly gasped. The simulation had changed, now mimicking the sensation of oxygen deprivation, combined with extreme pain receptors firing throughout her body. Stop this immediately, Corin demanded, moving to override the controls. Wait, said one of the council observers, pointing to the tissue sample displays. The blood sample had changed. At the microscopic level, the cells were transforming, developing the very structures Corin had observed in her simulation. The other samples followed. Cells reorganizing their internal structures, producing the combat-enhancing compounds predicted by the genetic analysis. Inside the chamber, Takeda's eyes had widened, her pupils dilated fully. Her muscles tensed visibly, and sensors indicated a massive spike in neural activity. Shut down the test, Corin ordered, pushing past Saw to the emergency override. The chamber immediately cleared, returning to neutral conditions. Takeda remained frozen in the chair, her body still locked in its heightened state. Then, slowly, she relaxed, blinking rapidly as her systems returned to normal. What happened? She asked, her voice hoarse. Corin displayed the cellular monitoring results on the main screen. The protocol activated, she said quietly, exactly as the simulation predicted. Takeda stared at the display in disbelief. That's impossible. We would know if our cells could do this. Would you? Commander Saw asked. If the protocol only activates under extreme conditions rarely encountered in your controlled societies. Our history is filled with war and survival situations, Takeda argued. This would have been documented. Perhaps it was, Corin suggested. In your mythologies of supernatural strength, berserker warriors, or humans performing impossible feats to save loved ones. The laboratory fell silent as the implications settled over them. Finally, one of the council observers spoke. The council must be informed immediately. This confirms the presence of a biological weapon within human genetic structure. It's not a weapon, Takeda protested. It's a survival mechanism. A distinction without difference. Saw replied coldly. I will inform the Imperium. Samples must be secured for further analysis. As the group argued, none noticed the junior lab assistant, Nerin, quietly downloading the test results to a portable data crystal. The young Tharan had been approached 3 days earlier by an anonymous contact offering substantial credits for information from Dr. Vesh's laboratory. What had seemed like harmless industrial espionage now felt much more significant. Slipping the crystal into his pocket, Nerin backed toward the door. Just a quick trip to the communication hub. A simple data burst to the coordinates he'd been given, and his financial troubles would be over. The consequences were someone else's problem. The emergency council session lasted well into the night cycle. Lieutenant Takeda stood before the 7 speakers, still shaken from the testing experience but determined to advocate for humanity's interests. "This genetic feature is not a deliberate weapon," she insisted. "It's an evolutionary adaptation no different from a cornered animal's desperate strength. Yet far more sophisticated," countered Speaker Movar. "The cellular transformations produce compounds our military spent decades developing artificially during the Blood Era, which suggests convergent evolution, not malicious intent," Dr. Vesh interjected. She had positioned herself beside Takeda, increasingly uncomfortable with the militaristic direction of the discussion. Commander Saur paced at the edge of the chamber. "Intent is irrelevant. Capability is what matters. If humans possess this genetic advantage, the Imperium must have access to study it." "Absolutely not," First Speaker Thelen declared. "Any research into this genetic protocol will be conducted by the Collective under strict ethical guidelines. The Concordat gives us equal rights to defensive research," Saur insisted. "It gives you rights to defensive information," corrected Second Speaker Linthi. "Not to biological samples that could be weaponized." As the argument escalated, Lieutenant Takeda raised her voice. "You're all missing the point. This isn't about military advantage. It's about understanding human biology. My people deserve to know what's written in our genetic code." "And what would humans do with this knowledge?" Saur challenged. "Your species nearly destroyed itself multiple times on your homeworld. Would you enhance this protocol, weaponize it further? Or would you seek to remove it?" asked Dr. Vesh quietly. "Eliminate a part of what makes you human." The debate was interrupted by an urgent communication. "First Speaker," came the station coordinator's voice. "We have an unauthorized shuttle departure from Docking Bay 12. Commander Saur stiffened. "Whose shuttle?" A pause. "Records indicate it belongs to Research Assistant Naren from Genetics Division." Dr. Vesh felt ice in her veins. "Naren had access to my laboratory. He assisted with preliminary sample analysis." "Track that shuttle," Saur demanded. "It's already engaged its jump drive," the coordinator reported. "Destination appears to be the Ziran border outpost Kreld 6. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Commander Saur's feathers bristled in what Takeda recognized as the Ziran display of rage. "Your security is compromised," he snarled at First Speaker Thelen. "I must inform my government immediately." "This changes nothing about our agreement," Thelen insisted. "Any genetic samples remain under collective jurisdiction." "Those samples are already en route to Imperium space," Saur retorted. "Your jurisdiction is now meaningless." As the political situation deteriorated, Dr. Vesh pulled Lieutenant Takeda aside. "We need to act quickly," she whispered. "If Naren took viable tissue samples, they could be replicated and experimented upon without ethical constraints." "What can we do?" Takeda asked. "I've been developing a counter-protocol, a genetic subroutine that can temporarily deactivate the combat sequence," Vesh explained. "It's theoretical, but if we could perfect it quickly, you'd have a fail-safe if the Zirans attempt to weaponize the protocol," Takeda finished. "I'll help however I can." Their whispered conference was interrupted by Commander Saur's angry departure from the chamber. First Speaker Thelen approached them, his scales displaying patterns of deep concern. "Dr. Vesh, you must secure all remaining samples and data. Lieutenant Takeda, I suggest you return to your vessel and inform your government of these developments. With respect, First Speaker, I believe I should remain here." Takeda replied. "Dr. Vesh and I are working on a potential safeguard." Thelen studied them both. "Very well. But be aware that diplomatic relations between the Collective and the Imperium may soon deteriorate. Your presence here could become complicated." As the speaker departed, Vesh turned to Takeda. "We should return to my laboratory immediately. If Naren took what I fear he did, we have very little time." Aboard the Ziran flagship, Talon of Justice, Commander Arik Sor reviewed the preliminary reports from the Science Division. The stolen human tissue samples had arrived 6 hours earlier on Research Assistant Naren's shuttle, along with complete data on the combat protocol's activation parameters. "The genetic sequence is unlike anything in our records," reported Chief Geneticist Kral, her feathers sleek with excitement. "The potential applications are significant." "Can it be replicated?" Sor demanded. "Better," Kral replied. "We believe it can be enhanced. The human version appears to be a naturally evolved safety mechanism with limitations. Those limitations could be removed." Sor studied the holographic model displaying the protocol's structure. "Begin immediate testing on expendable subjects. I want a working prototype within 3 cycles." "Commander," Kral said hesitantly, "the collective will certainly develop countermeasures once they realize what we've acquired. Then we must work quickly." Sor replied, "This could shift the balance of power permanently in our favor." As Sor left the laboratory, he was unaware that something had already gone wrong. In the secure containment area, one of the human tissue samples had been improperly stored, subjected to conditions that triggered the combat protocol. Microscopic structures had formed, then broken free of their containment field, too small to trigger alarms, yet active enough to seek out new cellular hosts. The ventilation system carried these nanoscopic entities throughout the lower decks of the massive vessel. The first infections occurred among maintenance crew, Zirans working in the environmental controls sections. Their symptoms began subtly: increased aggression, heightened sensory awareness, resistance to fatigue, useful traits for military personnel, so the changes went unreported. But the protocol, designed for human biology, interacted unpredictably with Ziran physiology. The transformations continued, accelerated, became uncontrolled. By the time the ship's medical sensors detected anomalies, 17 crew members were affected. Dr. Corin Vesh and Lieutenant Takeda worked through the night in Laboratory 7, unaware of the developing crisis aboard the Ziran flagship. They had made significant progress on a counter-protocol, a genetic subroutine designed to recognize and neutralize the combat sequence. "The problem is delivery," Vesh explained, gesturing to their simulation results. "We need a vector that can distribute the counter-protocol rapidly if the combat sequence is weaponized." "What about a viral delivery system?" Takeda suggested. "Engineered to target only cells where the protocol has been activated?" Vesh's compound eyes widened. "Brilliant! It would ignore normal cells but seek out and neutralize those that have transformed." Her fingers flew over the controls, adjusting their model. "We could use a modified rhinovirus as the base. They're highly contagious but cause minimal symptoms." Their work was interrupted by an emergency alert. The laboratory door sealed automatically as red bioluminescent lighting pulsed through the corridors. "Attention all personnel," announced the station's coordinator. "We have received a distress signal from the Ziran vessel Talon of Justice. They are reporting a biological contamination event and requesting immediate scientific assistance." Vesh and Takeda exchanged alarmed glances. "It's begun," Takeda said quietly. "Station defenses are at maximum," the announcement continued. "The Ziran vessel has been instructed to maintain a safe distance. Dr. Corin Vesh is requested in Central Command immediately." As they hurried through the pulsing corridors, Vesh transferred their research to her portable unit. "We need to complete the counter-protocol," she told Takeda. "Whatever's happening on that ship, I suspect it's only the beginning." Central Command was in chaos when they arrived. The main display showed the massive Ziran flagship holding position 5,000 kilometers from Archaeus 9. Smaller tactical displays showed unusual energy patterns within the vessel. "Dr. Vesh." First speaker, Thelen, acknowledged them. "Lieutenant Takeda, the situation has deteriorated rapidly." "What's happening?" Vesh asked. "Approximately 9 hours ago, the Ziran vessel reported unusual behavior among crew members. 6 hours ago, they lost contact with entire sections of the ship. 3 hours ago, affected crew members attempted to seize control of the bridge. The combat protocol, Takeda realized. It must have activated in the samples and spread somehow. Precisely our conclusion, Thelen confirmed. Commander Saw managed to send a final transmission before communications were cut off. He reported that infected crew members exhibit heightened aggression, resistance to standard weaponry, and apparent coordination despite no communication devices. Swarm behavior, Vesh muttered. The protocol must be transmitting signals between affected individuals. Can it spread to other species? Asked Speaker Movar, his military background evident in his practical focus. Unknown, Vesh admitted. It evolved in human biology, but clearly it's affecting Xerans. We need more data. We've been developing a counter-protocol, Takeda added. A genetic subroutine that could deactivate the combat sequence, but it's not ready for deployment. How soon could it be ready? Thelen asked. Vesh calculated quickly. With full laboratory resources, perhaps 12 hours. But we need a delivery system that can reach the affected individuals. That may be problematic, Movar interjected. The Xeran vessel has just engaged its engines. All eyes turned to the main display. The Talon of Justice was indeed moving, its massive engines glowing as it changed course. They're setting a vector for the jump point, one of the tactical officers announced. Estimated time to jump capability, 40 minutes. The implications were immediately clear to everyone in the command center. If the infected vessel entered hyperspace, it could emerge anywhere in the galaxy. The combat protocol could spread to countless worlds. We must prevent that jump at all costs. Thelen declared, prepare defensive systems. If necessary, we will disable their engines. Wait, Takeda interjected. If you attack, you'll trigger a war with the Imperium. We need another option. Do you have one, Lieutenant? Movar asked skeptically. Takeda looked to Vesh. We need to board that ship and deploy the counter-protocol directly into their life support systems. That's suicide, Movar objected. The infected crew would tear you apart before you reached environmental control. Not if I trigger my own combat protocol, Takeda said quietly. I could match their enhanced capabilities. A heavy silence fell over the command center. You would risk your life to contain a threat your own DNA created? Thelen asked. It's the only way, Takeda insisted. Dr. Vesh and I will take a shuttle to the Talon. She'll finalize the counter-protocol while I secure a path to their biocore. I cannot authorize such a mission, Thelen said. The risk is too great. With respect, First Speaker, you don't have authority over me. Takeda replied, I'm acting as Earth's representative to prevent a galactic incident. Before Thelen could respond, the tactical display chimed an alert. The Xeran vessel is hailing us, the communications officer announced. Audio only. Put it through, Thelen ordered. The voice that filled the command center was unmistakably Commander Saw's, but distorted, strained, as if he were fighting for each word. Archaeusna, this is Saw. Ship. Compromised. Most crew. Infected. Protocol spreads through. Air systems. A harsh, rattling breath. I am. Fighting the changes. Cannot hold. Much longer. Destroy this vessel. Before. Jump. Commander Saw, Thelen responded. We have a potential solution. Can you grant access to a boarding party? A long pause, filled with labored breathing. Docking Bay 4. Still secure. Environmental controls. Deck 17. Hurry. The transmission cut off abruptly. Thelen turned to Vesh and Takeda. It appears you have your mission, Lieutenant. But Dr. Vesh cannot accompany you. We cannot risk our leading geneticist. I need her, Takeda insisted. The counter-protocol isn't finished. I can guide you remotely, Vesh suggested, though her reluctance was evident. You'll carry the base code and necessary equipment. I'll direct the final synthesis from here. Takeda wanted to argue but recognized the logic. Fine, but I'll need someone familiar with Ziran vessel architecture. I'll go, volunteered a voice from the back of the command center. All turned to see a junior tactical officer step forward. I specialized in Ziran ship design before joining the station. I know their environmental systems. Officer? Thelen inquired. Jarrell, the young Etheran replied. Tactical systems analyst. Thelen considered the volunteer, then nodded. Prepare a shuttle immediately. Lieutenant Takeda, Officer Jarrell, you have 35 minutes to reach that vessel and deploy the counter-protocol before it achieves jump capability. As the command center erupted into activity, Dr. Vesh pulled Takeda aside. The counter-protocol is still experimental, she warned, and deliberately activating your own combat sequence is extremely dangerous. We don't know the long-term effects. Do we have a choice? Takeda asked. Vesh's compound eyes seemed to shimmer with emotion. No, but promise me you'll administer the counter-protocol to yourself as soon as the mission is complete. The combat sequence was never meant to remain active for extended periods. I promise, Takeda said, grasping the xenogeneticist's elongated fingers in a gesture of trust. Now let's finish this counter-protocol before that ship jumps. The shuttle approached the massive Ziran flagship with thrusters at minimal power, trying to avoid attention. Lieutenant Takeda piloted while Officer Jarrell monitored the ship's systems from the co-pilot's seat. Docking Bay 4 shows as operational, Jarrell reported, his scaled fingers dancing over the controls. But I'm detecting unusual movement patterns throughout the vessel. The infected crew appears to be congregating around key systems. They're protecting the ship, Takeda realized. The protocol is driving them to ensure the vessel can jump. We're being scanned, Jarrell warned. Automated defenses. Takeda opened a communication channel. Talon of Justice, this is Lieutenant Takeda from Archaeus 9, requesting emergency docking as authorized by Commander Soar. No response came. But after tense seconds, the scanning beam deactivated. Docking bay doors are opening, Jarrell confirmed. Automated systems must still be following Soar's last commands. Takeda guided the shuttle into the cavernous docking bay. Unlike the organic architecture of Aetharan vessels, Ziran ships featured angular, metallic designs emphasizing strength and functionality. The docking bay was empty of personnel, a bad sign. Even in emergencies, Ziran protocols demanded docking officers at all arrivals. Atmosphere reads as breathable, Jarrell announced as they completed docking procedures. But I detect unusual particulates. The protocol may be airborne. Then we use breather units, Takeda decided, retrieving 2 masks from the emergency supplies. And we move fast. How far to environmental control? 17 decks up, Jarrell replied. The central lift would be quickest, but also the most exposed. Service tunnels? Exist, but they're narrow. If we encounter infected crew, there's no room to maneuver. Takeda checked the equipment pack containing the counter-protocol components and synthesis unit. Dr. Vesh would guide the final preparations remotely once they reached environmental control. We take the lift as far as we can, then reassess, she decided. Stay behind me if we encounter resistance. You're not planning to activate your protocol yet? Jarrell asked hesitantly. Not unless absolutely necessary, Takeda replied. Once activated, I'm not sure how well I can control it. They exited the shuttle, breather masks secure, and moved cautiously through the deserted docking bay. The ship's lighting had dimmed to emergency levels, casting long shadows across their path. Takeda carried a standard-issue neural disruptor, non-lethal but usually effective against most species. The corridor leading to the central lift was empty, but signs of struggle were evident. Scorch marks on walls, indicating weapons discharge, and dark stains that Takeda recognized as Ziran blood. Life signs? She whispered to Jarrell, who carried a portable scanner. Scattered, most concentrated 10 decks up, between us and our destination. They reached the lift without encountering resistance. The doors opened automatically, revealing an empty chamber. As they entered, Jarrell input their destination. "Deck 17, he instructed the computer. "Access to Deck 17 restricted," replied the ship's AI in the formal tones of Ziran computer systems. "Biohazard containment protocols in effect." "Override," Takeda attempted. "Emergency access by order of Commander Soar." "Voice pattern not recognized," the AI responded. "Proceeding to nearest unrestricted deck, Deck 12. The lift hummed into motion. Takeda and Jarrell exchanged concerned glances through their breather masks. "5 decks short," Jarrell noted. "We'll need to find another way up." "One problem at a time," Takeda replied, checking her neural disruptor. "Deck 12 is where you detected the highest concentration of life signs." The lift slowed, then stopped. As the door slid open, Takeda moved protectively in front of Jarrell, weapon raised. The corridor before them was dimly lit and appeared empty. They stepped cautiously from the lift, sensors sweeping for movement. "Life signs all around us," Jarrell whispered, studying his scanner. "But I don't see—" A blur of motion from above cut off his words. A Ziran dropped from a maintenance hatch in the ceiling, landing between them and the lift. Takeda raised her weapon, but froze at the sight of the transformed crew member. The Ziran's normally sleek feathers had hardened into spike-like protrusions. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural amber light, and its talons had elongated into vicious weapons. Most disturbing was its posture, not the upright, dignified stance typical of Zirans, but a predatory crouch that seemed more bestial than sentient. "Lieutenant," Jarrell warned, backing away slowly. The transformed Ziran tilted its head, studying them with those glowing eyes. Then it opened its beak and emitted a high-pitched cry that echoed through the corridor. "It's calling the others," Takeda realized. "Run!" They sprinted down the corridor as more cries answered the first. Takeda glanced back to see additional transformed Zirans emerging from side passages and maintenance hatches, all converging on their position. "There," Jarrell pointed to a maintenance accessway. "Service ladder to upper decks." They reached the accessway just as the first of their pursuers closed the distance. Takeda fired her neural disruptor, catching the transformed Ziran mid-leap. The creature convulsed as the neural energy coursed through its system, but instead of collapsing, it merely staggered, then continued its advance. "They're resistant to neural disruption," Takeda shouted, firing again to buy time. "Get the hatch open!" Jarrell worked the accessway controls with frantic precision. The hatch slid open, revealing a narrow vertical shaft with ladder rungs embedded in the wall. "Go!" Takeda ordered, firing repeatedly to hold back the approaching horde. Jarrell scrambled into the shaft and began climbing. Takeda backed toward the opening, maintaining suppressive fire until the last possible moment, then dove into the shaft herself. She grabbed the emergency override and slammed it down, sealing the hatch behind them. Talons immediately began scratching at the sealed hatch. "They'll find another way up," Jarrell warned, his voice echoing in the confined space. "We need to move quickly." They climbed in darkness, guided only by Jarrell's scanner and emergency lights that glowed at irregular intervals along the shaft. The sound of pursuit faded, then returned, coming from both above and below. "They're in the shaft with us," Jarrell whispered, his voice tight with fear. "Different access points." Takeda checked their position. "We're approaching Deck 15. 2 more to go." "Life signs above us," Jarrell warned. "They're waiting." Takeda made a quick decision. "We exit at 15 and find another route." They reached the hatch for Deck 15 and paused. Listening, no sounds came from the other side. Jarrell checked his scanner. "Clear for the moment," he reported, "but they're moving through the ship in patterns, like coordinated hunting packs." Takeda nodded grimly and operated the hatch release. It slid open silently, revealing a dimly lit corridor similar to the one they'd fled. They emerged cautiously, closing the hatch behind them. "Environmental control?" Takeda asked. Jarrell oriented himself, then pointed down the corridor. "Main access would be 2 decks up, but there's an auxiliary control node in engineering. This way." They moved as quickly as stealth allowed, alert for any sign of the transformed crew. The ship felt eerily abandoned in some sections, while others showed signs of desperate struggle. Twice they had to hide as hunting packs of transformed Zirans passed nearby. "The protocol is changing them beyond just combat enhancement," Takeda observed as they waited for a group to pass. "It's affecting their behavior, their coordination. It was designed for humans," Jarrell reminded her. "In Ziran biology, it's unpredictable." They finally reached engineering, a massive chamber dominated by the ship's matter-antimatter reactor core. The room should have been staffed by at least 20 engineers. Instead, only a single figure stood at the main control console, hunched over the displays. Takeda raised her disruptor, but hesitated when the figure turned at their approach. Despite obvious signs of transformation, the hardened feathers, the glowing eyes, she recognized Commander Saw. "Lieutenant! Takeda!" he rasped, his voice strained as if fighting for each word. "You came!" "Commander Saw," she acknowledged, lowering her weapon slightly but remaining wary. "You're infected." "Fighting it," he managed. "Most of the crew, already lost. I've been redirecting the ship away from populated systems. We have a counter-protocol," Takeda explained, gesturing to the pack Jarrell carried. "If we can deploy it through the environmental systems, we can stop this." Saw's talons gripped the console edge, the metal warping under his enhanced strength. "No time. Ship will achieve. Jump capability in 15 minutes. Cannot stop the engines. Fail-safes. Disabled." "We can deploy through auxiliary environmental control," Jarrell said, moving toward a secondary console. "It won't reach the entire ship immediately, but it will spread." "Work quickly," Saw urged. "I cannot hold much longer." As Jarrell began preparing the console, Takeda contacted Dr. Vesh through their secure channel. "Doctor, we've reached auxiliary environmental control. Beginning counter-protocol synthesis now." "Understood," came Vesh's voice, distorted by interference. "Connect the synthesis unit to the console and upload the base code. I'll guide the final configurations remotely." Takeda removed the synthesis unit from Jarrell's pack and connected it to the engineering console. The small device hummed to life, displaying the base genetic code they had developed in the laboratory. "Upload complete," she reported, "beginning final synthesis." While Vesh guided the process remotely, Takeda kept watch on Commander Saw. The Ziran military officer was visibly struggling against the infection, his body trembling with the effort of maintaining control. "How did this happen?" Takeda asked him. "The protocol should have remained dormant in the samples." "Arrogance," Saw admitted. "Our scientists attempted to enhance the sequence, accelerated its adaptive capabilities, lost containment. Why are you still able to resist when others couldn't?" Saw's glowing eyes fixed on her. "Military implants, neural buffers designed to resist mind control, buying time, but failing." Across the room, Jarrell called out, "Synthesis at 60%, 8 minutes to completion." "Too long," Saw groaned. "Ship jumps in, 7 minutes. Must reach main environmental control. Deploy. Ship-wide immediately." "Where is it?" Takeda demanded. "Deck 17, Central Hub." Saw's body convulsed suddenly, and he fell to one knee. "Cannot hold." Takeda made a split-second decision. "Jarrell, continue the synthesis. When it's complete, deploy through auxiliary systems as a backup." She turned to Saw. "Commander, Can you guide me to the central hub? The Zirin commander fought to regain his composure. I will try. Lieutenant, you can't go alone, Jarrell protested. The transformed crew will tear both of us apart unless I activate my own combat protocol. Takeda interrupted. I need you to ensure the counter protocol deploys, even if I don't reach the central hub. Before Jarrell could argue further, Takeda removed a small injector from her equipment belt. The device contained a compound Dr. Vesh had developed, a catalyst designed to trigger the combat protocol within her cells. Lieutenant, wait, came Vesh's voice through the communicator. The risks are necessary. Takeda finished. She pressed the injector against her neck and activated it. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Heat surged through her veins, followed by a wave of sensation so intense that she dropped to her knees. Every cell in her body seemed to ignite, transforming in ways she could feel but not see. Her vision sharpened dramatically, colors intensifying until the world seemed to glow. Sounds became crystal clear. She could hear Jarrell's rapid heartbeat, the hum of the ship's systems, even the movement of transformed Zirins 2 corridors away. Most striking was the surge of strength that followed. As she rose to her feet, Takeda felt as if gravity had lessened. Her muscles responded with precision and power beyond anything she had experienced. Lieutenant, Jarrell's voice seemed distant despite his proximity. Are you still yourself? Takeda focused on his face, fighting through the rush of new sensations. Yes, she managed, her voice sounding strange to her enhanced hearing. But we need to move quickly. The protocol, it's powerful. She turned to Commander Sor, who was watching her transformation with a mixture of fear and fascination. Lead the way, Commander. We have a ship to save. Sor struggled to his feet. Follow, closely. Many infected between here and Control Hub. As they left engineering, Takeda glanced back at Jarrell, who had returned to monitoring the synthesis. 6 minutes to completion, he called after them. Hurry. The corridors seemed different to Takeda's enhanced senses. She could detect the chemical signatures of the transformed Zirens, smell their passage, hear their movements through the ship's structure. Commander Sor led her through service passages and emergency routes, avoiding the largest concentrations of infected crew. You resist. Well, Sor observed as they paused at a junction. The protocol enhances without consuming you. It evolved in human biology, Takeda replied, surprised at how calm she felt despite the adrenaline flooding her system. It's working as designed. In Zirins, it overwhelms, destroys, higher functions. Sor's body convulsed again, and he gripped the wall to steady himself. Ship jumps in. 5 minutes. They continued their journey upward, encountering scattered resistance. Twice they were forced to fight, Takeda discovering that her enhanced strength and reflexes allowed her to disable the transformed Zirins without killing them. Sor fought alongside her, though each confrontation weakened his resistance to the infection. Finally, they reached Deck 17. The central environmental hub lay just ahead, a circular chamber containing the controls for the ship's life support and atmospheric systems. Hub! There! Sor gasped, pointing down the final corridor, but heavily guarded. Takeda's enhanced vision confirmed his warning. At least a dozen transformed Zirins patrolled outside the hub entrance, moving with the coordinated precision of a hive mind. They're protecting it, she realized, preventing anyone from interfering with the ship's jump. Cannot fight so many, Sor warned. Need distraction. Takeda assessed their options. The synthesis should be complete by now. Jarrell will deploy through auxiliary systems soon. We just need to reach the central controls to accelerate distribution. Sor straightened suddenly, his eyes clearing for a moment. I will provide distraction. You reach controls. Commander, You won't survive. Already. Lost, he replied with grim acceptance. My final service to the Imperium. He removed his command insignia and pressed it into her hand. When this is over, tell my people I died, with honor. Before Takeda could respond, Saw stepped into the main corridor and emitted a piercing cry, different from the hunting calls of the transformed crew. The patrolling Zirans immediately turned toward him. For the Imperium, Saw shouted, charging toward them. The transformed crew responded instantly, converging on the commander. Takeda waited until they were fully engaged, then sprinted for the hub entrance. Her enhanced speed carried her past the conflict before the remaining guards could react. The hub doors were sealed, but yielded to Saw's command insignia. Takeda slipped inside, securing the doors behind her. The circular chamber was deserted, its consoles blinking with automated warnings. Jarrell, she called through her communicator. Status? Synthesis complete, came his reply. Deploying through auxiliary systems now, but coverage will be limited to engineering sections initially. I've reached the central hub, Takeda reported. Transferring counter-protocol to main environmental controls. She connected her portable unit to the hub's central console and began the transfer process. The ship's computer fought her at first, programmed to resist unauthorized changes to life support. Takeda used Saw's insignia again, overriding the security protocols. Transfer at 40%, she reported. Ship status? Jump sequence initiating, Jarrell replied, alarm evident in his voice. 2 minutes to hyperspace capability. Takeda worked frantically, redirecting power to accelerate the transfer. 60%. 70%. A massive impact shook the hub doors. The transformed crew had dealt with Saw and now focused on breaching the hub. Each blow dented the reinforced metal further. 80%, 90%. The doors gave way with a screech of tearing metal. Transformed Zirans poured into the chamber, their glowing eyes fixed on Takeda. Transfer complete, she shouted as the first of them reached her. With a final command, she activated the ship-wide deployment. The environmental system hissed as the counter-protocol entered the air circulation. Fine mist sprayed from vents throughout the chamber, coating everything, including the transformed Zirans and Takeda herself. The effect wasn't immediate. The transformed crew continued their assault, forcing Takeda to defend herself with her protocol-enhanced abilities. She fought desperately, knowing she needed only to buy time for the counter-protocol to take effect. Gradually, the attacking Zirans began to slow. Their movements became less coordinated, their glowing eyes dimming. One by one, they collapsed to the deck, their bodies convulsing as the counter-protocol neutralized the combat enhancements. Takeda felt the change in herself as well, a cooling sensation spreading through her system, dampening the heightened awareness and strength the protocol had provided. She staggered against the console, suddenly exhausted. Jarrell, she managed through the communicator. Jump status? Sequence aborted, came the relieved reply. Engine control regained. The counter-protocol is spreading throughout the ship. Life signs are stabilizing. Takeda slid to the floor, her back against the console. Around her, the transformed Zirans lay unconscious but alive, their bodies gradually returning to normal. What about, Commander Saw? She asked. A long pause. I'm sorry, Lieutenant. He didn't survive. Takeda closed her eyes, feeling the last of the combat protocol fade from her system. She had fulfilled her promise to Dr. Vesh. The counter-protocol had neutralized her own enhancement along with the infected Zirans. Contact Archaeus 9, she instructed. Tell them we succeeded. 1 week later, Lieutenant Takeda stood before the Etharan Council chamber, still recovering from her ordeal aboard the Ziran flagship. Beside her stood Dr. Corin Vesh, who had led the medical team that stabilized the surviving Ziran crew members. The Imperium has formally acknowledged Commander Sor's sacrifice. First Speaker Thelen announced. They have also agreed to destroy all research related to the Human Combat Protocol and to support its classification as a protected genetic sequence under the Concord. Protected, not prohibited, Takeda asked. A critical distinction, Dr. Vesh explained. Prohibition would have required elimination, potentially from the human genome itself. Protection recognizes it as an integral part of your species, not to be weaponized or exploited. The Xirin survivors? Takeda inquired. Fully recovered, Vesh assured her. The counter-protocol successfully neutralized the combat enhancements without permanent damage. They remember little of their time under its influence. And what of humanity? Asked Second Speaker Linthi. Your government must be informed of this. Genetic heritage. Takeda nodded. I've transmitted a full report to Earth Central. They've agreed to classify the information but will incorporate awareness of the protocol into medical research. Understanding it may lead to treatments for conditions we never knew were related. A wise approach. Thelen acknowledged. This incident has changed the collective's perspective on human potential. Your species carries both remarkable capability for violence and the wisdom to control it. Dr. Vesh stepped forward. With the Council's permission, I propose establishing a joint research initiative, Etharan and human scientists studying the evolutionary implications of the combat protocol and similar genetic adaptations across species. The Genesis Protocol Research Initiative, Takeda suggested, focused not on weaponization, but on understanding the code written into life itself. First Speaker. Thelen's scales shifted to a pattern indicating approval. The Council supports this initiative. Lieutenant Takeda, would you consider remaining at Archaeus 9 as humanity's scientific liaison? Takeda glanced at Dr. Vesh, who nodded encouragingly. I would be honored. First Speaker, there is much we can learn from each other. As the formal session concluded, Takeda and Vesh walked together through the organic corridors of the station, discussing plans for their new research initiative. The combat protocol raises profound questions, Vesh observed. Is violence inevitable in evolutionary development? Can sentient beings transcend their genetic programming? Perhaps that's the true test of sentience, Takeda replied. Not whether we carry the capacity for violence, but whether we choose when to use it and when to find another way. Your handling of the protocol was remarkable. Vesh noted, most test subjects would have been overwhelmed by the enhancements, yet you maintained control. Perhaps because I understood what was happening, Takeda suggested. Knowledge itself served as a kind of counter-protocol. They reached the observation deck, a transparent section of the station's hull offering a spectacular view of Archaeus and the stars beyond. In the distance, the repaired Xirin flagship prepared for departure, its crew recovered and chastened by their experience. Do you think we'll ever fully understand what's written in our genetic code? Takeda asked, watching the distant vessel. Dr. Vesh's compound eyes reflected the starlight. I believe understanding begins with acceptance. Your species carries both darkness and light in its DNA, as do we all. The Genesis Protocol isn't just about combat enhancement. It's about resilience, adaptation, survival, and choice, Takeda added. The choice to be more than our programming. As they stood together, watching the stars, the question hung between them, does our genetic past doom us to repeat violent cycles, or can conscious choice rewrite the code of sentient life? The answer, they both knew, would be written not in DNA, but in the decisions of those who carried it.